Hi, today we're going to make pork and vegetable steam buns. So one of the first things that you need to do is you need to activate your yeast. I like to do that just to make sure that my yeast is alive. So I'm going to pour in about 125 grams of hot water that I just boiled. So you want to make sure you don't kill your yeast. So your temperature should be between 110 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, it's looking good. It's about 104 degrees, 105. Okay, so now I know it's not going to kill my yeast, as long as it's not above it, but I don't want to bloom all my yeast in there. So I'm going to take some of the water out. And I'm going to put in some sugar to feed my yeast. So in this recipe, we're using 1 tablespoon of sugar, but I'm not going to put the whole thing in. I'm just going to put in about half. I just need a little bit to start my yeast going. And I'm using 1 1/4 teaspoon of yeast. So here's 1 teaspoon. Okay. And we'll give this a mix. And then we'll check back in about 5 minutes to see if it's 5 to 10 minutes to see if it's activated. Okay, while we're waiting for the yeast to activate, I'm going to go ahead and measure out the amount of flour that we need. So the amount of flour that I need is, I believe, 500 grams. One of my friends, my Asian friends, has told me that this Korean flour actually makes really good buns. And I think it does. It makes a difference. They seem to be fluffier, lighter. So we're going to go ahead and use this flour to measure out 500 grams. Oops. So you can actually do this in a bowl without using a mixer, but I have a rotator cuff injury, so we'll be doing it in this bowl. So one of the other things that you need to put in here along with your flour is I put in a little salt, about 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and I'll go ahead and put in the rest of the 1 tablespoon of sugar. So go ahead and give that a little mix. Okay, so to get started, check your yeast. It does look like it's bubbling more and foaming, so I think I'm going to go with it. So what I want to do is I'm going to be adding in the rest of the warm water and the yeast water in batches. And all you really need to do is just form it into a ball where it's all gathered up. And then next I'm going to put in the yeast water. Okay, I'm going to make sure I get it all because I want to make sure my dough rises. Okay, so while it's mixing, if you might want to stop it and just make sure that you scrape down the sides of the bowl a little bit before you keep going to get all the flour and stuff. If your dough looks kind of dry, you can add in more water depending on where you live and stuff. It's winter here, so I think actually it's kind of dry here because it looks okay. It doesn't actually doesn't look that bad, but I can tell at the bottom that the crumbs are not picking up, so I'm just going to add in a tad more water, maybe about 1/2 teaspoon at a time or a teaspoon at a time. Okay, it looks like it's starting to gather it all up, so I think that's enough water. Okay, and once it's pretty much all together, you can take it out. I'm going to take it off, put it on the board, and and roll it together in a ball. Okay, it feels pretty good. So it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth and rolled nicely, because it is going to rise for about another hour and 40 minutes or an hour and 30 minutes. And after the first rise is when you're going to probably spend some more time kneading it to get all the air bubbles out. Okay, it's a little bit crackly, but that's okay because it's going to rise. So I form it into a ball. I'm going to put it in my oiled bowl, give it a little spin, and then we're going to cover it, and we'll put it in a warm place to rise. Okay, one of the places that I find a place for my dough to rise, a warm place, is I actually have a toaster oven. So I will turn on my toaster oven for a little bit and put my bowl right near it. Okay, that's it. We'll see you guys back here in an hour and a half. Okay, so while you're waiting for the dough to rise, we're going to go ahead and make the pork and vegetable filling. So I buy ground pork already made. I mean, if you want to, I guess you could cut your own, but why not just buy it? And I don't buy the very lean pork. I actually buy the pork that's fattier. I get it from an Asian market, so I think the grind on the machine is correct, and the amount of fat is correct. So I'm going to use 350 grams. What I like to put with my pork is vegetables, and I like to use Taiwan cabbage, which is a flatter cabbage. And I usually take about 5 to 6 leaves off. So this cabbage, the leaves are really stuck on bad. So I took it off kind of badly, but you take them off, you give it a wash, and then you'll have to chop it up. And I also like to put in shiitake mushrooms, dried. So you soak them for about 2 to 3 hours. And another thing I also put in is some ginger, about half a teaspoon grated, and also some garlic, about 1 small clove finely grated also. While we're waiting for the dough to rise, I like to put cabbage in. So I'm using the Asian cabbage, and I always cut out the hard parts. And what I do is I will go ahead and mince these up into little pieces, and I will go ahead and salt them and let them sit there for about 10 minutes or so, and then I'll squeeze the water out. Okay, so I will go ahead and chop them into, let's see, about the size while I'm salting them. Okay, so now it's all cut into little pieces, and what I do is I'll go ahead, sprinkle some salt on, and what I'm doing is flavoring the cabbage, and also I'm trying to get some of the moisture to come out of it, because after 10 minutes or so I'm going to go ahead and squeeze it. Okay, let's set that aside and let that reduce a little, and the moisture come out. So then we'll go ahead and cut up the shiitake mushrooms. I go and I take out the stems, because those are not edible, and we'll cut these up into bite-sized pieces again. I'm thinking maybe 2 mushrooms is enough, because my mushrooms are pretty large. So I'm not going to put the third one in. Okay, the next thing that we're going to get ready is spring onions or green onions. And I need half a cup of green onions, finely minced also. The green part and the white part. If any leaf is kind of broad, this one's not that broad, but if it's broad, I like to cut it in half before I chop them up. I'm going to actually go ahead and measure half a cup. probably want more of the green tops than you do of the bottom white part. Because it'll give the filling some color. The reason that I'm setting it aside is because we're going to add this at the very end to your mixture so that the color stays fresh and green. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the ginger. So the ginger, I just use very little, about half a teaspoon. And what I do is I'll go ahead and take the skin off. You can take it off with a spoon if you want, but if you don't have a spoon, you can just use the edge of your knife. And I grate the ginger in, about half a teaspoon. And I want finely grated because I don't like to bite into a piece of ginger. Okay, let's see. Okay, that looks about maybe half a teaspoon. So let's keep going. Okay, that's about half a teaspoon, maybe. Okay, and then we're going to put in also 1 clove of garlic, finely grated also. I want to be able to hold it while I'm grating it. Okay, here we go. Okay, that's good enough. And get that in there. Is we're going to start with oyster sauce. And we need about 1 tablespoon for that. And then we will go and add 2 teaspoons of soy sauce. Now my cabbage is salting. So because my cabbage is going to be salty, I'm going to add in a little bit less soy sauce, 1.5 teaspoons. The recipe calls for 2 teaspoons. And also 1 teaspoon of dark soy sauce. And 1 teaspoon of sesame seed oil. Okay, actually it was 2 teaspoons of sesame seed oil, so let me go ahead and put another one in. Okay, this is good for the memory. Okay, so, and half a teaspoon of salt. Okay, let me pour it over here just in case I miss. Okay, that's about half a teaspoon of salt. The thing that we're going to add is 1 teaspoon of sugar. Well, not the last thing actually, but we will add 1 teaspoon of sugar. Okay. And because we want our filling to be juicy, another thing that we're going to put in is a quarter of a cup of chicken stock. Okay, and then you go ahead and you mix that all up. But okay, that looks good to me. So we'll just let this sit here while I go check on my cabbage. Okay, so my cabbage feels more limp, so I think it's good. So I'm going to go ahead and squeeze the water out before I put it into the meat. See how much water is coming out? See, I don't want that in my filling. See, just from that one bunch or 1 fistful, I have this much water. Okay, so after you squeeze it out, go ahead and put it into your filling. I'm going to go ahead and take the next one. Okay, so I don't think you have to do this part. I mean, I've seen on YouTube that some people do it and some people don't, but I do it because I just feel like there would be too much water in your filling. Cabbage water. Okay. And that's it. Okay, so let's mix it in. Okay, so we're still waiting for the dough to rise, so I'm going to go ahead and put this in the fridge while we're waiting for the dough to finish rising. And what lapchang is a Chinese sausage. So I will go ahead and include it with about 6 buns. I'll take a piece, 1.5 lapchang that I have here, because I'll cut them into halves and then into quarters. And the quarters I will cut in half. So each bun will get 2 pieces. Been proofing for about 1.5 hours, so let's go get it and see what it looks like. Okay, I cover it. I'm not really sure why, but I've seen other bakers do that. So I figure, why not? Looks like a good idea. Okay, so it looks like it's doubled in size. And one of the ways that you can tell if it's proofed enough is if you poke your finger in, it should not bounce back. The hole should stay there. Okay, the hole stays there, so that's good. Okay, so let's get this out. And we have to knead it again. I'm going to go ahead and use my mixer because of that shoulder injury, but before I used to knead it by hand on this board. And they say to knead it for about 8 minutes, so I'm thinking maybe 5 minutes in here should help to get all the air bubbles out and stuff, because that's really what you're trying to do, get all the air bubbles out. Okay, while my dough is being kneaded in the machine, let me tell you some of the things that I did. So I got parchment paper ready, and I cut it into squares about this size, maybe about 2 inches or 1.5 by 1.5. And you want to get your bamboo steamer ready, or whatever steamer that you're going to use. I like to use bamboo steamers because the water moisture is kept in the lid, so it won't be dripping into your baos. Another thing that you want to do is after you make your baos, you're going to have to let it sit in the steamer covered for about 15 minutes to let it proof again. And it's recommended to let that sit over some warm water. So I kind of brought these pots of water to boil, turned off the flame. I'm letting it cool a little bit, so by the time that I finish making my baos, they'll still be warm. And then I'll let it sit there for 15 minutes. Did I say 15 minutes? I meant 5 minutes. Okay, so it's been going here for 5 minutes. It feels pretty good, nice and soft. So I'm going to put it on this board. And it's not sticking to the board, so I'm not going to add any more flour. But one of the things that I'm going to check is to see how many air bubbles are in this dough. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it in half. Oh, that's pretty good. There aren't like a lot of air bubbles in it. It's actually pretty smooth. So I'm going to say that this dough is good. So I'm going to roll it into a circle. And it's pretty thick, so I'm going to cut it in half, and then from that half I'm going to go ahead and make my pieces of dough. So I'm going to work with one half first, and the other half I'm going to go ahead and put it under here and keep it covered. I'm making it into a ball. Then I'm going to make it like a donut shape. Just say. Okay, so I have a loop. Okay, and let's cut our pieces of dough. Now I'm looking for each size to be about 48 to 50 grams. And for this amount of dough, I usually get about 14 pieces, 50 grams. Okay, so what you do is when you have, okay, so all these pieces of dough that I weighed and measured, I'm going to make and form it into a ball so that when I make my wrapper, it'll just be easier if it's already in a circular shape. You won't have like a oblong wrapper or square wrapper. Okay, I've taken the second piece of dough. I'm going to go ahead and do the same process. $14.5. Okay, that's right. Okay, so the next thing that you want to do is you're going to make your little wrappers. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of flour on my board in case it sticks. And let me get the filling from the fridge. Okay, here's my filling, and I'm going to go ahead and put the green onions in. Okay, and each wrapper, I think I will be putting in about 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of filling. Okay, here we go. So I'll take one dough, make it into a circle. So it's pretty circular right now. So you want to take your rolling pin and roll it out a little bit. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making my edges thinner than my middle. So it's about this size, and I'm going to go ahead and start expanding it by rolling just the edges now. And I'm looking for a size wrapper, maybe about 5 inches across, or about the size of your palm. Okay. So it's about like this size in my palm. I'm going to 1.5, maybe 2 tablespoons of filling. So what you want to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a pleat with this thumb and finger. Then I'm go around and keep doing that. And I never want to let go of the first pleat. So just keep going around and around. And this thumb on your left hand helps to push the dough. Okay, I'm telling you, we'll see how it looks. Okay, now when I get to the end is when I always have trouble. So I'm going to go ahead, take it, and then twist it around and try to close the top. Okay, so it kind of looks something like that. So I'm going to make it a little bit circular. Okay. Okay, so I'm down to my last few balls left. I just want to mention to you, when you get down to near the end, just see how many ball doughs you have left, and then just portion out your meat that way. Scoop of meat in the middle, lapchang that I cut in half. I stick it on the side. Then I start folding. I'm going to put some red on it. So they've been rising for 15 minutes. Let me take a look and see what it looks like. Okay, they rose a little bit, not too much, but a little bit. Well, that's good enough. So we're going to turn on the flame, and we're going to start timing 15 more minutes from when the water starts to boil. Okay, so 15 minutes have gone, and your buns are ready. So after you turn off the flame, you need to let them sit there without lifting the lid for 3 minutes. So if you lift the lid, then the buns will deflate. So, okay, let's see what they look like. Ooh, wow. They look pretty good. Okay, let's take one. Nice, hot and steamy. Smells really good. You can smell the ginger, the garlic, and the chives. Oh, very juicy looking. Okay, let's take a taste. Really good. The dough, very tender, but also has that fluff to it. I have to say that flour is really good. Okay, I did it. Okay, bao ma. Have a good night.